Good afternoon, mums and dads. Welcome to the second installment of the mini webinars that we're doing this week. Still recovering from a cough. I suppose everybody is going through most people are going through this season. So, yeah, this is us hosting the mini webinars, which are basically aimed at talking about and commemorating the National Freedom Day. And today's topic is quite simple: children and freedom, balancing the two. And what we basically had in mind was that it's easy for all of us to just jump and ask for freedom, ask for our rights, and want to claim all our rights and say, hey, I want to be free. It's my right to be free. Um, what happened in 1994 gives me access to that freedom. And most people tend to also use, excuse me, this concept of freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom to do whatever they want, and they go to town with it, forgetting that with freedom as well as with rights comes responsibilities, and it's actually responsibilities before rights. So we tend to miss all of that, and we want to then claim all of it while we're still irresponsible. Similarly, when it comes to children, as parents today, our children are much woke than we were. They are more vocal than they used to be, and they are quick to tell you about their rights. It's my right to freedom of speech. I'm free to do what I want. And most parents tend to fall into that trap, while others just don't buy or any of that. And some parents would even go to the point of saying, for as long as you're under my roof, you are not going to have any of that. What I say goes. So this thing of freedom out there, not here. But what actually does all of that mean for us as parents, for us as fathers who are raising children? What does it mean when children say they are free and they want their freedom? Does it mean that we have to unleash them into the world and let them do as they want? I don't know, but I do know. And maybe following yesterday's or our first episode, where instead of just leaving the questions open ended without being answered, we actually now get into it and provide answers to those questions. So, what we'll then say is fine, you say you want your freedom, you want the freedom to go and do and be whoever you want and choose whatever you want to choose. But as a parent, I've been given the responsibility to raise you as a child. And in raising you as a child, it is my responsibility to ensure that as you go out into the world, you are not just going out into the world raw, uncultured, ungroomed, and you behave as if you're a wild animal, as if you don't have a home, as if you don't have human parents or parents with thoughts who can think and who themselves have been cultured and raised and groomed to be certain individuals. And as humans, I think we've got the unique abilities that we have over animals, where we can talk, where we do a lot of the things differently to the animal kingdom. And I suppose that that also then gives us access to many different things. We are the ones who get to change the world. We are the ones who get to impact the world. And because we get to do that, every descendant that comes through us needs to be raised in that manner. Every child that we bring into this earth, we're given the responsibility to raise. The Bible says in Proverbs 22, foolishness is bound in the heart of the child, and the rod of correction will drive it out. So if we do not correct, if we do not shape and mold children into what their purpose and, and their destiny requires of them, they will miss it, because they will also come back at a later stage when they realize certain things and say, but my parents never taught me, my parents never raised me, they just let me be. And sometimes we think we're doing our children a huge favor by letting them be, by just simply allowing them to do whatever it is that they want. What they want, they get, because hey, it's their right. They're free to claim their rights. Wherever they want to go, then we allow them, we let them. Whatever choices that they want to make, we simply let them, because they do have that freedom to choose. But is it really, do they really understand the consequences of the choices that they're making? Do they really understand what happens? Have they really thought through things properly? Or they're just doing things haphazardly? And that's the very most important question. How do we raise children so that we balance freedom and their responsibilities? How do we ensure that we enable them to be people who are raised perfectly? And as I said yesterday, that we don't raise perfect children, but we raise children perfectly. And part of raising children perfectly means that we have to equip them with certain things. We have to equip them with certain tools for their development, for their growth in their lives. And if we don't do that, we are doing a huge disservice to their lives. Now, tough love is painful. Tough love is painful for us as adults and for children as well, but we all need it. And if we let our children grow up without ever knowing tough love, without ever getting to groom them and being tough on them and being hard and showing them that life will not always be kind to them, then we're doing a disservice to them. If we always give them what they ask for, if we always allow them to throw temper tantrums and then we capitulate to that, then we are doing them a disservice. Whenever they ask, it's not really always that the good things that they ask for are good for them. There are things that our children should not be exposed to, should not be given for their own good. And if we as parents then allow them to just choose and then we just follow without ever interrogating and really getting how do they get to think and process things, then we're doing a disservice to them. So let's rather unpack all of this and determine how best can we as parents do what we're supposed to do, and that is parent our children. It starts by us as parents learning to stand our ground. It's very important that we stand our ground. And sometimes we have to stand our ground even when it hurts us, even when it may be the most unpopular thing to do, when other children are getting exposed to certain things. And you, as a parent, say, no, you cannot have this. Not because it's out of spite and not because necessarily you can't afford it. Sometimes even when you can afford something, you don't always have to give your children what they always ask for. Because if we really look at it, we're creating a culture in a child of entitlement. I can always ask for this and I know I'll get it. I can always, it doesn't matter what it has to be. If I ask for it, I will get it. And that's the mistake that we make. We believe that our children, whenever they shrug their shoulders and now they're grumpy, and now they're withholding maybe affection, and they tell us they hate us, that we have to capitulate and say, oh no, my child hates me. Then let them hate you. But at the end of the day, are you teaching them the right things? Because that's the most important thing. We need to be instilling values, principles, and beliefs in a child. We need to be instilling discipline in a child, because we will grow up, they will grow up, and we will give the world and society a toxic person. A toxic person who goes around thinking that they're entitled to anything and everything that comes their way. We will be raising children who think they have to take whatever it is that they want, and they cannot accept no. And that's why then you would have um, especially boy children who grow up and are perpetrators of gender-based violence, because somebody said no to what they wanted, and therefore they feel entitled to it. That's why some children then will even go to lengths of stealing things, because they believe they can take whatever it is that they want. They have not been taught that if it's not yours, you can't have it. Even when you've asked for it, for as long as the other person possesses it and they've refused to give it to you, then it's not yours. Yes, there are things where we'll teach our children that sometimes you should not accept a no for an answer, but that is when you are pursuing your goals. That is when we contextualize actually all of that. There are times when a no is not acceptable. You go on and you knock on the next door for opportunities, but you don't take what doesn't belong to you. When somebody says we were in a relationship and the relationship was good, but now it's over, accept that it's over. Whether you're a boy or girl, accept that it's over. Accept that this person has made their choice, and walk away from it. Allow yourself to accept the loss of this relationship, of this intimacy with this person. And those are the things that we need to teach our children. We need to teach our children that life will not always be kind to them, that life will not always nurse them. Life will punch them in the face. Life will. And when it does, what do? You take the punch. If you feel like you're bleeding, wipe your nose, wipe the bleeding, treat your wound, get up and move forward. But what do you do when you move forward? You don't just move forward. Oh, I got beaten there by life, and then I'm moving on to the next thing. Okay, but what did you learn? What did you take from that? Oh, I don't know. I just moved on. But you don't just move on from things. Go back, reflect. What is it that was there that you needed to learn, that you were supposed to learn, that you may have missed? And then from there, you take that and then you move with that forward. So you are collecting a bag of lessons along the way. And one day you take all of those lessons, you realize you've got all of this knowledge that you've acquired about certain circumstances, and then you start correctly applying that knowledge in other circumstances, in other places in your life. And guess what happens then? You are becoming wiser, you are growing. But that does not happen when a child has not been taught. I'm a firm believer that the schooling system is supposed to identify the potential within a child, the abilities within a child, and then enhance those. Teach and enhance how we think. We are not taught to think from a very early age, where you get to sit in front of a teacher and you're not given a solution, but you're given ways of how to get to a solution. Does the solution work? Did you follow the methodology? Did you follow the process? What process did you follow? Were you thinking through each and every step that you were taking to get to the solution? because there will be another time where you will have to follow the same step. Yes, there are others who have found a problem and followed certain steps to get to the solution. And they teach you that this is where you start with this problem. And to get to that solution, you need to follow A, B, C, and D. But once you know and you understand why was this person doing this, why did each and every step has had to be there till you get to the solution, then you start thinking, okay, I understand. And that's why I remember there was a time when I was learning maths where you would be taught all the steps, removing the brackets, and then from there maybe calculating what was inside the brackets, removing the brackets, and then going on and on and on. Maybe you get to a mathematical solution with 10 steps. But once you know everything in between, you then start calculating others mentally, and then you just write the other step that is required, the other step that is required that gives you the marks, that also gives you the solution. And even you could write the problem statement and then thereafter write the solution, because you would have worked it out and you know, because you just looked. Why? Because you've learned the methodology of getting to the solution. And that's basically what we need to do with our children. Teach them how to get to the solution first and break down all the steps, and then eventually they will learn to condense all of those steps in between and get to the solution. But if we don't teach them, if for example they ask for a PlayStation and we run to the store and get the PlayStation, boom, we've given it to them just like that. What have we done? They ask, they get, they ask, they get. I want, I get, I want, I get. Okay, I need to manipulate and then I get. But some things don't work like that in life. And we need to raise children who are life ready, children who can go through a life and say, I can take care of myself. I can find solutions for myself. I can think through things. And at this day and age, there are so many things that our children are doing. It's sometimes a wonder and a shock to observe. But also, as parents, we are absent. We are absent. We fail to teach them. We fail to guide them. And so they get to discover things by themselves. They get to be demanding because they can always blackmail us. And amazingly, children from a very early age, they can already know and sense where they can pull the strings to get what they want, and who to manipulate and who not to manipulate. And so this thing of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom to do what they want, freedom to go wherever they want. When we fail to raise our children perfectly, they become somebody else's nuisance. And when they become somebody else's nuisance, we then complain. When society rejects the children that we have put out there, we cry. No, these people don't like my child. No, these people don't want my child. And then we start opposing the world because of our children. And sometimes we see that this behavior is not right. And we may even be at a point where we want to correct that behavior, but it's too late for us to do that. And so what do? We then throw our children to social workers. We throw our children to psychologists. And when the psychologist and the social worker says the problem is at home, we then think, this one is crazy, this one is wara wara wara. We say all sorts of things, and we don't want to take responsibility. And we blame the professionals for misdiagnosing our child. But the problem is us. We have not done the work. And whenever the finger comes back to point at us, it's too hard to bear. And so we'd rather deflect that finger and point it back at everyone else except for ourselves. Are we raising our children perfectly? Or are we simply raising our children out of guilt? And because we're raising our children out of guilt, we do not do what is necessary, but we do the easy part. We don't want to say no. And slowly we create little monsters. We take these little monsters, we throw them at school. We take these little monsters, we throw them at church, Sunday school teachers. Let it be their problem while we take a break. We throw these little monsters to the nannies, and we blame the nannies when the children are not turning out the way they're supposed to, or when the nannies start applying discipline. We then fight with the nanny. And then we'd rather be changing nannies because we don't want to have our children disciplined. Because, hey, it's their freedom. It's their freedom to love and be loved. But we think love is withholding discipline. We think love does not have a no. But love does have a no. There are things that must be a no. And we need to say that no. And we don't always have to explain certain things to our children, because there are things that we do in our wisdom as parents, but we really cannot explain it. But we know that this no is driven from it comes from the right place. But we shouldn't always be explaining it. I'll take it biblically. There are things that we would pray for, things that we would fast, do the 21-day fast, do the 3-day fast, and still not get them. Does that make God a bad father? No. It's because he, in his infinite wisdom, knows that if I were to give you this, especially now, it would kill you. There's an example that Bishop T.D. Jakes makes. He says he was once shaving and his son was standing next to him. And while he was shaving, he was looking at the mirror at who he used to be in his son. And his son was looking in the mirror, looking at who he was going to be. In part 2, he had a razor in his hand. His son wanted to use the razor, but at an early stage, if he gets the razor, he's going to cut himself. But at the right time, that razor becomes a tool. There are things that our children are not supposed to get when they are still too young, because they haven't matured enough to understand the responsibility and the implication of having that thing. And therefore, they shouldn't be having it then. When your child is supposed to be focusing on learning, there are certain things that they shouldn't be doing and certain places where they shouldn't be going. Applying curfew in a child's life is not the nicest thing, but it is necessary. And every curfew is age appropriate. When the child says, I want to go out, I want to go play with other children out there, or I still want to watch TV, I still want to play one more game, I still want to get through one more stage, play one more match. But it's time for the curfew. As a parent, you need to be firm and put that limit and say no and watch them, as grumpy as they are, walk and go to sleep. It's not the nicest thing, but it's necessary. So, as we talk about children and freedom, we also need to talk about the parents, the guardians, or the adults who are raising those children. What tools do they have? How equipped are they to handling all of that? And if we are not careful, we will always be criticizing the parents who are not raising the children perfectly. And we don't know that they don't have the right tools. But it also then comes back to, do the parents who are raising these children perfectly, or are supposed to be raising these children perfectly, have the necessary tools? And before us as externals judge those parents, we need to understand their side of the story. But also, as those parents, we also need to open ourselves up to receiving assistance in raising these children, because to always believe that these are my children, then always keep them in your house, in your yard, in your space, and don't let them go out there, because as soon as they engage with others out there, they will need the tools to survive out there. As they go out there into the world, they're going to engage with other people, and other people will reject them if they are not raised well, or if they're not raised perfectly. I'm not saying that they should conform, but they need to have the knowledge and the ability to think and analyze the situation. What is it that I need to do here? How do I need to be in this situation? Do I even belong here? But if we've never equipped our children for that, then they won't fit in. So when we talk about children in freedom, we need to balance that out. I believe freedom and age should go hand in hand. The younger the child, the less freedom they have. And the older they grow, the more freedom they get, provided they can show maturity in handling that freedom. And how do you know? As a parent, you first have to teach, coach, and mentor, and then let them out and see how they behave and see what happens. If they get it right, then you know they have the ability to handle more freedom. And you gradually give them that freedom, allow them that freedom. And whenever they come in and they say, this is what I've decided to do with my life, you interrogate their decision-making process. So why, how, ask all the relevant questions as a person, as a dad, or as a parent, to establish Did they just grab this thing out of nowhere? Or is it something they really gave thought to until they got to that point? And once they can prove that they really thought about it and they are responsible in the choices that they make, in the decisions that they take, then you know that they're able to handle more rights, more freedom, and you give them. There is nothing as beautiful as raising a child and seeing them being self-sufficient. There is nothing as beautiful as seeing your child as a parent being effective in the world and making waves, and you don't have to worry about them because you know they can think, they are mature, they can handle freedom, they can handle responsibility. And the irony of it all is a child who has proven themselves responsible, a child who has proven themselves able to handle freedom, they never have to ask for their rights. Because as a parent, when you see them doing this, you automatically ease up on certain things. Similarly, with rules, when you see that this child is too haphazard, you put rules in place to confine them to a particular behavior, to a particular conduct, to a particular thinking, to a particular association. But the more you see that they can handle themselves within that situation, you ease up on the rules, you ease up on the monitoring. And when you ease up, you observe. So you don't just like that, but you observe and you allow them that space. And once you've done that, you then decide, do you restrict or do you give more? As parents, firstly, we need to be open to co-parenting from other parents who are non-biological, by the way, because we cannot do it, because we will always gain different insights, but we always monitor their parenting styles first. And we learn not to criticize another parent's parenting style in front of our children. If there's an issue we have, let's rather address it privately and then come back to our children and address it in a way where it doesn't show that we're criticizing the other parent's parenting style. But it has to be a parent that we trust, that you trust. So you don't just take any other parent and you allow them into your space or into your child's space for them to parent your child or co-parent with you. It has to be somebody you're in a relationship with, a good neighbor, a good friend whose values and principles you as a parent admire, and you can allow them. In our home, we have this principle that any child who comes into our home is our child. If we have to reprimand, if we have to discipline, if we have to reward or do whatever, we do it as our child, as we would our own. And it's not that we'll do this one differently to ours or anything like that. We don't distinguish. If we have to apply discipline across the board, the same. Because we don't want to teach them that in this space you are less of a child than this one. And because this one is here, then you don't belong. They all belong. And thankfully, the parents that we do that with, they also understand that when they give their children to us, they are our children. Equally so, when we allow our child to be in their presence, we don't dictate how they should parent, because our values and our beliefs are aligned. So our children will not take advantage of any of those situations. Moms and dads, I hope that you have taken away something from this conversation, or maybe from this talk, that we get to learn that children don't deserve freedom carte blanche. Freedom has to be regulated. We ourselves, as grown-ups, our freedom is regulated, is limited. We are not free to do anything and everything we want. The world would be a different place. That's why even sometimes freedom of speech goes out of hand and people get hurt in the process. We need to be responsible. And we need to also apply the same responsibility to our children. So our children need to earn their freedom in the home. They need to be recognized when they've learned to be responsible with that freedom. And once that happens, we know that as parents, we're doing a good job. I'd love to hear your comments, your feedback. Please either email us or drop us a comment. Our email address is info@dadsinthepicture.co.za. Until tomorrow, when we tackle the next episode, take care and thank you for tuning in.